Keita Stewart, and I will be your panel host for this evening's Power at the Polls, the Importance of Voting in the 21st Century. Power, the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. African Americans realized a long time ago the power of the ballot and faced immense brutality and possible death as they fought for the right to vote. Though there has been progress, our vote, still under attack, is just as vital as a means to reclaiming power as before, because it pushes our country's democracy to function in a fair and equal way. The whole point of democracy is to ensure that everyone has their chance to elect a candidate and vote for policies that represent and benefit their communities. When we fail to vote, we essentially leave our livelihood and the livelihood of those we love to chance. On this evening, we once again have the opportunity to flex our political power at every level of the ballot. Power at the polls, the importance of voting in the 21st century. This evening, we will be discussing the importance of your vote and why every vote matters. With us, we have community leaders, educators, civic activists, and legislators, And we are going to explain and discuss the correlation between every level of government and its direct impact on the everyday lives of you, your family, and your communities. So getting started, before we get started, I would like to share with the audience, we will be doing a giveaway. So for all of the audience that are 18 years and younger, there will be questions that will be presented throughout the conversation. What I need for you to do is answer those questions. Be the very first one to put your answer in the chat. At the end of the conversation, we will find out and tally up all of the correct answers, and whomever submits the most correct answers first will win a $25 gift card. Parents are able to help, and in the nature of safety, we ask that only the parents, the adults, to please contact us when we announce the winner. All right. Additionally, as we are having this conversation, please feel free to drop any questions, any specific questions that you may have for our panelists, and we will do our best to get to those throughout the conversation. So without further ado, we are going to introduce our panelists, starting with Representative Crystal Matthews.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stewart. I am Representative Crystal Matthews. I hail to you from the State House of South Carolina. I represent District 117. I am a single mother of 5. I'm community mentor, and I am excited to be here with you all to help you understand a little bit more clearly how this political system actually works and how we can make it better.
Thank you very much, Representative Matthews, for taking the time to be here with us and providing your input and your expertise in this conversation. Next, I would like to present to the community Mr. A.J. Davis.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. My name is A.J. Davis, and I'm a community advocate. I am glad to be a part of this panel, and I represent an organization called Low Country Black Parents Association, where we engage and empower parents in the area of educational advocacy, of which political education and political capacity building is a part. And I am grateful to be able to share my knowledge and understanding of the political process tonight as well.
Thank you as well, Mr. Davis, for your time. And next, we have Ms. April Richardson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is April Richardson. I am the state organizing manager with Black Voters Matter. We are a national organization that works across 11 states in the southeast of South Carolina of the United States, serving grassroots Black-led organizations, do work not only around electoral justice, but also economic justice and overall issue work as they identify that's critical to their communities. And at the core of that is celebrating not only our power, but the love and joy that we bring to spaces. So it's a pleasure to be here with everyone this evening.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Richardson. And last but definitely not least, we have Mr. Roberto Stewart.
Good evening. I'm Roberto Stewart. I hail to you from Alexandria, Louisiana. I'm a 20-year retiree Air Force veteran, a graduate of Charleston Southern University in political science. Currently, I work as the data and research coordinator for South Carolina Association for Community Economic Development. So thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you again. And as you heard, this is a panel of individuals that not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. They have the receipts. One of my favorite radio hosts, Karen Hunter, and that's one of the things that she likes to say, show me the receipts. Well, these individuals definitely have their receipts. And so as we start this conversation, again, I would like for you to please, take heart to what is shared here. If there's anything, any part of the conversation that you do not understand, this is the platform to gain some understanding. I am a community health worker, during the day. And one of the things that's my passion and what I call is my superpower is really breaking down complex, ideas and making it understandable to everyone. One of the things that we, when it comes to power is it's not only just knowledge is power, but it's putting that knowledge into action. That's where the true power comes into play. And that's what we're here to do, is to not only give you the information and the knowledge, but also to direct you to how you can now put your power into action. So the first question I would like to ask the panelists and get your clarification or your answer from everyone. It doesn't matter who starts. The first question is, how is local level voting more important than our national vote? I mean, a lot of times we focus on the presidential, the vice president, but when it comes to our local municipalities and governments, why is that probably more important than our actual national vote?
Okay, I'll go first. Right now, the state legislature just redrew the district or the districts within the state for the since the census has happened. The state legislature, in my opinion, is technically a local vote. It's the people like Representative Matthews that you see. They come out to meet you. They talk to you. They listen to your concerns as citizens, and you vote for them. They in turn make those decisions on what that looks like. Now, in some states, like a Georgia or a Texas or a Florida, they can gerrymander to an extent those districts away from certain strongholds. If you look at it from a Democrat and Republican type view, and some of those districts where you would have two Democrats side by side in different districts in Texas specifically, I know of a few districts in which they have pitted those Democrats against each other because they've redistricted their state.
Okay,
That's a local vote. Go ahead.
Explain to me, what does gerrymandering mean exactly?
Okay, gerrymandering. Let's see. A real layman's way of putting it is, I have effectively um, redistrict a area that will favor me as a, let's say, a Republican versus a Democrat. I redistrict that area so that although it may still seem like the majority of this area is blue, I've effectively gotten three other districts out of it, two of which are now Republican, one of which is now Democrat. But feasibly, what could have happened, you could have easily gotten two Democratic slots out of it as opposed to one Democratic slot. They do this, and so if you look at not South Carolina, because South Carolina is pretty evenly done. You will look at a state where they will have districts that go around certain places. They don't look like they don't sit on normal lines of delineations like a street or a per se like a river. It'll look odd. Why did you parse this area this way? But if you're not, voting locally for your local representatives and senators, that is one of those consequences of things that could happen to you.
Got it. So essentially, the community does not actually represent, or the representative does not actually represent that community because individuals didn't vote. So who's actually represented are the individuals that vote.
To an extent, yes.
To an extent, okay.
Another reason why voting locally is so vitally important is because it's at your local levels where your resources and the decisions that most immediately impact your life are taken up. I know we tend to get caught up in the national level politics of who's in the U.S. Congress, who's in Senate, and the presidency. And those races are, in true fashion, they are important. But when we think about things like our tax rates on our property values, we think about things like the zoning in our areas. We think about things like how our schools are funded, how we get funding for our roads, libraries, public infrastructure. Those things are taken up at a local or state level. And it's at those levels that we need to make sure we not only vote, but we understand who we're voting for, as well as the issues that they can address. I'll let Representative Matthews speak, but I know that there are some people that are oftentimes confused as to who has the power to do what. You may be thinking that, some people are asking state representatives for things that are happening on a local level and vice versa. So it's not just about voting at the local level, but being familiar, especially in our community, with the differences at the levels that we're supposed to vote in. So our school boards, how our schools are run, how they're funded, all of that takes place at that level. County council, again, if you're in an incorporated municipality like the city of Charleston or the city of North Charleston, that's your city council. So there are multiple layers that have a direct impact on the quality of life. And that's, in my opinion, one of the biggest reasons why voting locally is so vitally important.
Okay, I will chime in if that's okay. So, can y'all see my cake? I know that's probably hard to see.
Yes. Yep.
Think of it as a 3-layer wedding cake. Your local is going to be the people who are closest to you, your fire, your transportation, your water, your roads, the people that you can touch. So one of the questions I tell people to ask yourself, how many people do you know in the local layer of your cake? You need to make a cake at home, and then you need to list all the local people that you know in your cake, and anybody missing, you need to find them and add them to your cake. I assure you they affect something you do. If you are worried about something at the state level, again, you need to fill your cake up with names that you know. Most of us know the top layer of the cake because it's the president and the vice president, right? But as you can see, what's at the bottom is holding what's at the top up. this is the part that matters the most, because it's the part that's closest to you, that's tangible, that you can touch. That means whether your school has buses or not. That means whether your kids eat a certain kind of food in their cafeteria or not. What kind of housing restrictions are in your neighborhood? Who can move next to you? Whether they can build an apartment next to you. All of those things are local. And if you are not sure who's leading you, I write you out a little, sketch you a 3-layer cake out on some paper and start filling in the names. And then that'll tell you how many people you know versus how many people you don't know, and how much you do or don't know what they do.
Absolutely. Love it.
That was awesome.
Right.
I know, like, what's like, no, but if I can kind of, I guess, add to the ingredients in the cake here, I love that analogy. I'm going to share it, not steal it, and give credit. But I think that that's a great way to also think about understanding the importance from a standpoint of what affects the other. For example, it is at our local elections that we kind of begin to influence what's happening, like we said, in our city, in our county. That's also going to impact the way that our state legislature behaves. Because if we have councils and mayors and other systems and people in place that are all kind of representing our local interests, then when it comes to decisions that are made at the state house, they also have to then, that plays a role there. But whoever is that we are electing at our state legislature and at state level offices, like our governor, like our secretary of state, is also going to impact the results that we get at the federal level. Well, in my work, I often hear people that will kind of, I won't say complain, but are a little disappointed or frustrated by the process because they're trying to figure out, well, what is, the president, whoever it might be, or what's holding up Congress. And the question becomes, well, who did we vote in at these lower levels that then end up being a part of that decision making? So those layers of cake really uphold each other. The federal government is limited in its power because the way that our government is set up is that it's state first. And so that's what we have to understand. And so then from there, our local is what's really going to relate to what we see on a day-to-day basis. So even as we're thinking about building power, again, I think keeping that cake analogy in the presence of our mind is crucial, because you wouldn't build a cake top down.
Right.
If you try that, it's going to fall apart. We have to build it from the bottom up.
Absolutely.
So by participating in our local elections, it does two things. One, it's the quickest way for us to see demonstrative changes. So when we're talking to people or community members who may not feel like they're a part of this process, if I can change your mayor, if we can change the way that our city councils look, you're going to see that change quickest. Then we move up to state, and now we're talking about the way that our schools are run at the state level, what we're seeing across the board when money gets distributed from the federal, how it's being distributed, that's state. So then you start to see those kind of changes. And then at the top layer, at federal, then now you've got that pushback at the state that's telling you this is exactly what we want. And the only way that you're going to get anything passed through Congress, or, if you're supporting these things that we've already decided that we want at the state level, then all of that stuff kind of starts to make sense. I love this analogy. Thank you so much, Representative Matthews. I definitely want to take this with me. But that's a great way to think also large scale when we start talking about organizing in our communities, how to make that make sense.
Absolutely. Awesome inputs. Anything else? No. And I really, yes, everyone in the chat comments talking about the cake analogy. So Representative Matthews, thank you. I've never heard it put like that. And it makes so much sense. And it really is, that's how we need to communicate with one another, right? We need for it to make sense for us all, and not leave anyone behind. So
just so y'all know, that cake analogy actually came from me being invited to a lot of elementary schools to talk about politics. And unlike some others, I don't go in there and talk about me in politics. I want them to understand how the system works. And so what I have them do is split into essentially two parties of different cake flavors that they want to bake. And if they can effectively pass a law to bake this cake, I will buy them cake. But I have not had a class yet able to effectively bake this cake. What that does is show them just how tedious it is at coming to an agreement over something as simple as cake flavors. I mean, we had chocolate and vanilla, and then there was a little girl who wanted German chocolate. people didn't know what German chocolate was, and she couldn't explain it, and it just all broke down right over some cake. And it's like, but no, I don't want this ingredient. But that just shows you the legislative process right on its head. When we're fighting over legislation, it could look very simple, but then somebody throws in this one line, and we're like, no, we don't want to put red on the cake. We don't want the frosting to be gray, you know. And it's like, I just won't budge on my red frosting. So now we don't get a cake at all.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah, that's it. Okay, we can go home for no, I'm just kidding. But no, it really is that simple. You know, it really is that simple. But I think what has happened over time is the not the understanding of that process, and why is it so difficult for individuals that we have either voted for or by default, by not voting, have voted for, that can't come up with these compromises for the benefit of the country. So speaking of party lines, speaking of Democrat, Republican, two different parties at this time, Roberto, if you could explain to us how voting party lines or straight ticket could potentially be detrimental to the voting process. And, you know, then if you don't mind going into a little bit of explanation of how, you know, that relates to voting blocks. And, you know, we discuss strategies a lot of times. And as, you know, a community, one of the things that I would hope that we would work towards is strategizing a little bit better. You know, how can we utilize this idea to our benefit?
The one of the best examples I have, and I know this actually is happening because we live in the county. Picture you live in a neighborhood, and this neighborhood is pretty much it's well off. There's nothing wrong with it. Everyone likes what's happening in your neighborhood. And then you are told that up the corner from you, they're gonna stick a gas station on the corner. No one in the neighborhood wants the gas station. Nobody wants the gas station. Everyone's like, no, we don't want the gas station there. We like the traffic. We like people going through traffic. Gas stations do this, 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 and this. And this is a real situation because this happened because we stay in the unincorporated portion of Dorchester. But it did happen to us. Everyone at the council, with the exception of our representative who saw the neighborhood's distaste for them proposing to have that gas station there. Everyone else in the county voted for it, so it's gonna happen. Imagine if you walked into a booth and you vote straight ticket. If you vote straight ticket based off of, let's say, one person's proposal, or they say, hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and you're like, yeah, I like that. And you're like, hey, whatever party they represent, you say, I'm going to go down that ticket and vote Democrat or Republican or whatever. You are stuck essentially with however many different choices you have, but those are your representatives now. Those are your representatives at the local, state, and federal level. It doesn't mean that they all are going to do or be able to do the exact same thing. They, like Representative Matthews said, it's a cake. No one at the state level really cares about the store being at your being on your corner. No one at the federal level really cares about that. And so now, as opposed to being informed when you vote, you're voting blindly based off solely because, hey, well, the Democrats do this or the Republicans do that. That works at a detriment to you. You don't have the ability to actually go in, or you do have the capability to go in and listen and ask questions and find out what each representative thinks and what each representative stand for. But as opposed to informing yourself about what they stand for, you just took a chance on voting straight down that line. Um, I like to tell people vote as a community. For instance, 26% of all eligible voters in South Carolina are Black. What happens if those 26% vote for a certain candidate? And I'm going to use Miss Matthews because she is a candidate. I'm going to use her as an example. 26% in itself, you can't do anything with 26%. That part's true. But now I only need, technically speaking, another 24, 25% of the rest of those votes to push her over 51%. I don't have to go out there and go get 75%, 85%, 65%, 45% of a vote. I only have to get 25% to push her over that 51% margin. 51% is enough to win. 52% is great. But if we look at it like, oh, well, we just got that little 26, you're right. By itself, 26% can't do a whole lot by itself. But that 26% can propel any candidate over the top because you only need another 26, 25% to match. And that's doable. And I think if we broke strategies down that way, it would make more sense. And we should vote as a block that way to things that make sense to us, not be single issue party voters, not be technically party voters, but actually go and find out what those representatives, what they stand for, what they want, what you let them know what you want, because at the end of the day, it's important to have them hear your voice.
Absolutely. Awesome. And that kind of leads to my question for you, Mr. Davis. When it comes to finding out and doing that research on your candidates, how do we go about this? How do we, there's no way that we can go to all of the meetings, that we can go to, we can observe all of the different debates and so on and so forth. So how do we know who we're voting for?
Okay. So if we're talking about candidates, and that's people who are running for office, one of the most convenient ways is to find out if they have a campaign website and look there. If they have a social media page, look there. And if they are at any public or host any public events where they're trying to engage with the public, there. Now, when we talk about individuals who become elected officials, depending upon the level that they are, more often than not, you can visit it. In the case of a municipality, let's say city council, going to that municipality's website, and you can, excuse me, you can look at either the recorded meetings. Normally at the lower levels, they don't necessarily have recorded votes in the same way that you have up at the state level or the federal level, but you can see some of the items and the agenda items that were voted on, and they may have a tally. When you get to the state level, you can go to, in our case, scstatehouse.gov, where you can look at the House and Senate. There's also an app that you can download through the App Store for the South Carolina legislature. And it can be somewhat cumbersome, but one of the things, the tricks that Representative Matthews taught me, depending upon what topic that you are interested in, let's say you're interested in education, you can put that in your keyword search as an alert. And what that will do is give you an alert whenever there's a bill or legislation coming up for that particular item. And then you can kind of track the, you can kind of track the way these bills are coming up, who's sponsoring them, what the votes may be, things of that nature. And the same thing at the federal level. And the key, and I would say in all of this, if at all possible, whether a person is running for office or they are an elected official, in both cases, try to make your own attempt at personal contact. If they have an email address or some way that you can reach out to them, do that. If they become an elected official, they will have a email address that you can on your own, email them your questions and concerns that you may have. And I always encourage people to do that because, especially in our community, a lot of times we are disconnected from both candidates and officials because we oftentimes don't understand what communication means in that process. So I'll stop there.
And and with that, I don't, and Mr. Stewart alluded to this, is the fact that our elected officials work for us, right? They work for the community. They work for the citizens. And I don't think we fully understand that responsibility that they have to their community as well. So, and we just posted our very first poll question. So once again, I would like for all of our audience 18 years and younger, answer these questions and go ahead and put that in the chat. At the end of this conversation, what we're going to do is see who put the correct answer in the chat first. We'll tally those up, and then whoever has the most correct answers at the end, we will announce that, and then we will again talk to the adult in the room and ensure that you get your $25 gift card. All right. So Miss Richardson, where can a person view and or research, some of the laws, voting laws and practices here in South Carolina? And before you answer, I'm going to share a personal story. At the last presidential race, both my husband and I went on the same day in the same household, had my registration and all of that good stuff, and got there, and they didn't have me listed. They couldn't, find where I was supposed to be voting, and I had thought I had looked it up. But how do I ensure that doesn't happen again?
Absolutely. So there are a few pieces to that. So the first thing I'll say is that AJ kind of brought this up a little bit earlier, but that scstatehouse.gov is also where our legislation is housed. So a lot of either active bills or things that are established kind of standing law. And so there is a section on that homepage on the left side that will say South Carolina law. You can find it. It's Title VII, it's elections. And then it kind of outlines a lot of general provisos. However, I always reiterate to people, it is your local county board of elections that is your best resource for updated information. We do have a statewide website, that's scvotes.gov, which does have a tab. It's general, and then down there you'll see any election updates. You'll also find places to check your registration, to get registered online, to make sure that you have updated precinct information. However, going back to the conversation we just had about redistricting and the fact that when our lines get redrawn, that often means that precincts change. That could mean it moves, it closes, things like that happen all the time. Laws change about, the distance between precincts. Sometimes it's every 5 miles. It could be every 10 miles. There needs to be another. These things are constantly changing. And it's our local board of elections that send that information to the state level so that they can update their information. So it hits your county board first. So that's always going to be your best bet. They have individual websites. If you don't know what it is, you can always Google like Berkeley County Board of Elections, and their site should pop up for your given county. And that's going to be the best information to get up-to-date resources, especially since recently, even our laws around absentee voting has changed. Now we have early voting that we're in the middle of. So those kind of things, where to go, because that's different. These aren't precincts. These are specific locations for early voting. It's going to be your county board that's going to have that update information. What I will say specifically, though, if you find yourself on the day of an election, not sure what's happening, or someone telling you, hey, this isn't your spot, and they're not really offering you any additional information, 866 Our Vote is the voter protection hotline. And so that is actually run by our local ACLU is partnering with that. Our local reps for the Legal Defense Fund are also a part of that network that makes sure that you can report if you have issues, if you feel like something fishy is going on, but they can also tell you where your precinct should be, where you actually should be. So everyone should keep that number in their phone. That's 866 our vote.
Oh,
and make sure, and that's somewhere you can call day of and get up-to-date information as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that was really interesting. And I was able to get the information, but just the fact of that discrepancy within the household, and I've heard horror stories of other things and just people getting frustrated at that point and not wanting to follow through with voting at that point in time.
Something else, Chiquita, that I definitely want to make sure our audience knows, because this is something that tends to be used against people. If you move, you have to update your license and registration information in a certain time period before the next election that you vote in. And so what happens is people move, and a lot of people, and I've been guilty of this as well, may not change their driver's license. Right. They may not update it. So when they go, if they use, because a lot of people may not show their voter ID or voter registration card to their precinct. So they show up and they're told, okay, if you move in a new subdivision, I go to wherever they say we vote in my new subdivision. I show them my driver's license. My driver's license says my previous address. I can't vote there because according to my driver's license, that's not my precinct. And that I've seen that trip up more people than not, because it's a simple mistake. And again, anybody can be guilty of it, but especially in the age of voter suppression, especially in a state like South Carolina, they look for any and all things. And so what winds up happening, like you said, especially if somebody moved from out of county, now they're like, wait, I'm in Charleston and I'm supposed to vote back in Orangeburg. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not. So these are the type things that we need to make sure people understand, that it's not just knowing, the laws, but understanding your responsibilities when it comes to voting. Same thing with our college age children. Yes. One of the things in the Black community that we don't focus on enough is making sure that we send our kids off, not only with the idea of them going off to college to get a great education, but understanding their responsibilities as voters. So again, that's a conversation that we need to make sure we have with our babies before we send them off, because their votes matter. And that's the audience we're talking to tonight. So I think it's important, especially for parents of all college age kids, whether they're going off for the first time or they've already been there, making sure they understand the processes if they're going to school in state or out of state. So
very good stuff. Anything else? All right, we're going to continue moving on. So something that that came to mind as you were talking, Mr. Davis, was the idea of following up and kind of checking up on all of these things. And so this is a question to everyone. How does an individual stay up to date with all of this information? The different elections, so that's local, national, state, how do we keep up with the different elections?
I was going to throw it to April because I'm sure she knows that this is also listed on the SC Vote site by year, and it lists every single county, every single race. But just as a rule of thumb, every January, maybe you should print it out. There's an election every year. Whether you've heard about it or not does not matter. Just function with the knowledge of there being an election every single year.
There you go. I love that.
I would also echo those sentiments. In the Black community, more often than not, we get mobilized the most around presidential elections. So that's every 4 years. And what we have to understand, like Rep. Matthews is saying, there's a cycle, and it oftentimes depends upon your area. But like for that top of the cake, every 4 years is president. Every 2 years is your congressional races, House of Representatives and Congress. 6 year staggered increments, and this is where it gets confusing, but 6 years is your US senators. And I bring that up because I remember during the last Senate election that we had, I think probably 2 months afterwards, people were still reeling and upset because of who actually won. They're like, oh, when are they up? And I'm like, not for another 6 years. So a lot of people don't know that. But like she said, yes, you pretty much can account for every year there being an election. But this is where it's vitally important for you to understand your local elections and things like city council. And that's usually posted on your municipal website. So even you can go to scvotes.gov, or you can go to your municipal website. So City of Charleston, City of North Charleston, your town. If you live in a town, an unincorporated area like Town of Hollywood, it's there, right? So you can go look at that. Your school board races, which oftentimes trip up a lot of people as well. You can go to the school district website and find out where those races are, and also what are the requirements to run for that. But it's important, like she said, to just become familiar. I think, especially in our community, if we're going to speak honestly, a lot of times we don't necessarily educate ourselves on a lot of this. We hear a lot of the talking points that get put out in the media, and that's what drives our voting. It's not like Roberto said. A lot of times we don't even necessarily know the issue, but we may know the drama around candidates. And that's where in the Black community, we lose out. If we were to be honest, one of the things that, to give people homework, in addition to the cake analogy, is have people understand, if you have an issue in your community, say you've got flooding. Charleston is an area that has, no matter where you go, there's flooding. Who do you go to for that? And one of the lessons that I've learned in working and being a community neighborhood association president is you can live in a community that is in a municipality. And sometimes, depending upon how large your community is or your HOA is, you either talk to your city council rep or your county council rep. There's this thing called donut holes that we haven't spoken about, but that's something that impacts voting as well. And usually people don't find out about them until election time for things like your mayor. Like there are some people who live in the city of Charleston or the city of North Charleston, but they can't vote for the mayor. And that's something you don't find out until you until you go to the precinct and you try to vote and they tell you, oh, no, you don't vote in this election. Wow. So that's something else that's tripped up a lot of our communities in particular. And it's something that there's not a lot of conversation and discussion about that, I think we need to really start helping our communities understand.
And with that, and again, this is a conversation for the group. What would be some recommendations in how we continue to facilitate this conversation? I do know, as far as this happening in this platform, this group of individuals annually, but where else do we need to be having these conversations consistently?
So, go ahead. Go ahead, April.
I was just going to say quickly, kind of everywhere. So what I always kind of suggest to people is these have to become muscle memory conversations. Yes. So these are things that we are talking about in all spaces. Even kind of tying this into, the previous question, we kind of have to be responsible for this as a community. So that means that one person isn't going to be able to track every last election. And even if they know, if the larger body doesn't know, even going back to the thought about voting blocks, if everybody that's impacted isn't aware, we're going to find ourselves in the same predicament. Well, 4% turned out in this municipal race, when we really needed, and only 17% of the entire, city or the entire county shows up. Those are usually real stats for most of our communities at the municipal level. So it kind of has to be, taking a step back and thinking about where does my community gather?
Yes.
So for some of us, it may be houses of worship. And it's kind of reminding our churches that those are great places to organize for anything. We're not talking about, choosing a candidate. We're talking about determining what are the issues of our community. If you know that the majority of the members of your church have issues with their utility bill, then we need to start having conversations about the way that our city and county councils are dealing with those prices, how that works. Do you have a co-op in your community? So is it, in that case, then there are member meetings people need to be attending to have these conversations, versus if it's run by, a municipality, then you need to be showing up to these meetings. But we have to talk about those in those places. If it's not a house of worship, where do you normally see your community gather? If there's a community center and the kids are usually, the basketball tournaments in the summer is where everybody kind of comes out and congregates, then let's have a conversation, or let's plan when we're having these celebrations, for a great season. Let's have a conversation about that then. So it really is about not just creating spaces for these conversations, but incorporating them into organic moments. Yeah, that's a great comment from Felicia. If you already have neighborhood association meetings, if you already have standing meetings of other groups, making sure that, hey, we're going to take the last 5 minutes of our monthly meeting and make sure that we're covering, these are the local elections that are coming up. One thing that I did want to emphasize is elections pop up. So when you go to the, scvotes.gov site and you pull up that calendar, look at the bottom, and there's a lovely date that will tell you the last time that they generated this. So if it's been a month, you definitely want to check with your county board of elections to make sure, because there might have been something that's popped up in between and it hasn't hit that site yet. So things like that. So if we all take a mutual responsibility, then it's one person might be responsible for, I'm keeping track of the school board website. Anytime something new pops up, I'll make sure to add that to the agenda of this meeting, while somebody else is handling something for city council and, zoning specific, those kind of things. But I think that we have to figure out ways to make this a natural part of the way that we converse with one another, because oftentimes we'll be scrambling a week out or 4 weeks out trying to gather the group. But if we've been doing this for 6 months, more than likely someone's going to stop and go, hey, didn't you tell me they'll start asking you. It's kind of like, and I remember you mentioned this last time, give me more information. And that's kind of how this becomes muscle memory.
I love it. Wow.
I would just like to piggyback on to what she said. One of the things I think we need to do is make it less formal. Whenever we're talking about elections, we tend to formalize this whole conversation. I consider myself regular people. So I'm saying it needs to be less formal, meaning it should be, the barbershops. It should be a printout that they post in the barbershop. It could be in a grocery store. Some of the money that we allocate toward different things, like elections, for instance, maybe we should be including a mail out to businesses that they can post in their business of upcoming elections. It has to be less formal, because most people are not formal when it comes to politics. And most people that are regular don't want to be bothered with the formality of politics. So whether it's on a bus, in the barbershop, in the grocery store, in the corner store, the Habib store, whatever, we need something up on the wall that says, hey, this is coming up, or whatever. Like, it has to be less formal. Again, piggybacking on the commonality that April was alluding to, I'm just giving real world examples on how to make it formal, because everybody's not attending these meetings. Before I got elected, I didn't. So I certainly understand.
Absolutely. And that is something that, I think we discussed before, actually starting the conversation, is the fact of putting it at a level that everyone can reach, right? We are all working members of society, right? Nothing, like you said, nothing special about us whatsoever, but it does take intent. And I believe as April mentioned, if everyone takes a little part of all of this and we put our parts together, that's where we'll get the whole picture, right? Was there anything else that anyone wanted to share?
So this is going to be my shameless plug for Rep. Matthews and what she said. But seriously, watching her during her 2 terms, one of the things that I came to appreciate, and I know several others did, is that as an elected official, she did something that far too few, if any, did. And that is she explained processes. One of the things that turns a lot of people off about politics, especially in our community, is the relevancy or lack thereof. If we don't understand what you're saying and how it's relevant to us, okay, then we're not going to listen. I don't care how good the information may be. And to her point about how it's explained, we have to understand that there's a language that politicians speak internally, and there's a language that communities and voters speak. And so, one of the things that I think we also have to do, and I think April said it as well, there needs to be those of us, and I go back to researching things like the Highlander Institute. And what that did is it helped activists of the time, which were community members who wanted to build the capacity of Black people and the Black vote, not just for voting, but understanding how to establish our platforms and being able to ask and speak the language that politicians understood and make them speak the language that we understood. We have to go back to that. We have to look for representation like a Rep Matthews, who's willing to say, she uses her platforms, her social media, and when she's out in public, if you ask her a question, she is going to answer you. And if she doesn't have the answer, she'll tell you, I'll help you find it and I'll bring it back to you. And so that relatability and that accessibility is one of the factors that we have to help bring back into our communities when it comes to elections. And I think that that's important for us to make sure that we emphasize that as we try to get people registered and as we try to get people engaged in the voting process.
And can I just piggyback really quick? I wanted to add to that too, that we have to set the agendas for our communities. And I think that's where, to AJ's point with that disengagement, is because oftentimes our experience is someone is coming to us with a list of things that they intend to do. And half the time it's not even relevant to what's present of mind for us. But if someone that I trust in my community is saying, hey, these are our issues, this is what's important, these are the things, these are the questions we have, this is what we're looking for. And so anybody that's coming to you, that's talking to you about, your vote and what you're doing, this is what you need to ask any of those candidates. It does two things for me. One, I'm more likely to listen to you because I know you understand my pain points, because I already know you, I trust you. And second, I'm not, even if I am hearing jargon I'm not familiar with, or if I have somebody coming to me saying, this is what I can offer you, I already am equipped with what actually matters to me. So, okay, either I'm not even trying to hear that, or I hear what you're saying, but can you tell me how that impacts these three core issues that that my community has identified that's important to us? A huge part of figuring out how to get our community engaged is speaking to their actual needs. And so that means that we have to have conversations with each other. To Representative Matthews' point, we have to start having these conversations organically and informally. When someone is, in front of you complaining about the fact that, their school, the school that they take their kids to is too far out for them to, to catch a bus. Okay, well, who do we actually need to talk to about that? So when Susie, whoever says that she's running for, school board or whatever, that next step is going, hey, this is my issue. And if you're not addressing this, then I don't have, then I'm going to go to that next candidate. But we have to start empowering ourselves to say, we set the agenda for our community. We determine what's important to us. And if candidates are not coming to address those issues, then we move to that next candidate. And again, that even ties back into our, earlier discussion about the detriments of voting down, party lines. It's not about affiliation. It's about what we actually need. And when we set that agenda, we empower ourselves.
Absolutely. And, go ahead.
So two things. I know there's a lot of Black folks, so I'm just going to say this. It's just like church. This is not it's not a show. It's a participation sport. When people go to church and they're like, oh, church was dry today. Well, were you dry? What kind of energy did you bring with you? Mm-hmm. And also dating with no confidence. You go out on a date and you just want to do everything your date do. You want to please them because you don't, you want them to like you. But what do you like about them?
Right.
Did they meet your needs? Did they meet your requirements? You know, we got to stop dating with no confidence when it comes to our political candidates and our representation, because all we're doing is letting you show up. And if we're impressed by what we see, we get in the car. But if we're not, then we're like, I don't know. But at the same time, we haven't given them anything to rise to the occasion about. So again, don't date with no confidence. And politics is a participation sport. When people ask me, well, what are y'all going to do about this? I'm like, well, what are you going to do?
Right.
Don't just ask me what I'm going to do. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And are you sending people who are going to help me do what you want me to do? If you're not sending me no help, don't be coming over to me asking me what I'm going to do. I voted for teachers to get a pay raise. The people you need to talk to over there.
Go ahead now.
Don't be filling up all my time with your complaints and you voting for the enemy. You can't vote for them and they're not giving you what you want and then want to suck up all my time in my office. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to let you go. I'm busy. Y'all, we got to start dating with confidence, y'all.
I love it. And you know, that goes to my question. How is it that you gain that confidence to say, you know what, this is something I can do? Representative Matthews.
You know, really honestly, I figured I'm offering myself to help. The worst that they can do is tell me they don't want my help. And I had nothing to lose. I have been free from people for so long that I get to live free. And I'm not worried about people liking me because all I am doing is offering myself. And when you find people who are so stringent on holding on to those titles, the next question that you should be asking is why? Why is it so important? My whole life ain't wrapped up in a title. So I'm offering this to you. And if you don't want it, that's fine. But I'm offering it. And so for me, I didn't really need a whole bunch of anything because I figure, you know what? I think that I'm going to be good at this. And I believe that I have a viewpoint that not many other people have up here. And so what I'm going to do is offer my viewpoint. And what do you know? The people liked it. And I won not once, but twice in a way that nobody else has won. And I speak my mind. I don't kowtow and play nice. If I don't, you know, we're not anybody's footstools. You know, servant leadership is exactly what it sounds like. I will do as much as I can to be a resource for you, but I will not let you run over me. And I think that is something that we are missing in politics now because we've allowed so many things to occur that now nobody really understands what the role is. And we've allowed people to stay there so long that they're wrapped up in the title. And without it, they don't know who they are.
Yes, absolutely. Ooh, good stuff. I don't know about anyone else, but, and a lot of this stuff, you know, I've heard and I knew, but reiterating and just reinforcing this information is, again, something that we're going to have to continue to do over and over and over again until it becomes second nature, right? Yes.
There's something I want to say since Rep. Matthews brought up, you know, church. And there's a moment, something I got to lay at the altar because we're talking about our community. In 2022, I'm proud to be able to share space with individuals like the folks on this panel who are engaged and empowered. Our ancestors probably could not dream of something like this, where you got Black people talking in the affirmative about Black issues politically and talking with the idea of empowering our entire community. And there's something that I want to say, especially here in South Carolina. And I saw somebody put it in one of the chats about, you know, a lot of people say they vote, but they're not political. Black people's existence in America is political, whether folks ever want to acknowledge it or not. When our ancestors were brought over here as property and treated as such, our fight for freedom was a political fight as much as it was a physical one. The state of South Carolina is one of those states that proudly embraces that history of our enslavement. they proudly embraced the culture that deemed us as property. And so when we look to what the power of politics actually means, it's our existence. Through our votes and who we elect in office, we get one step closer to the actual realization of what it means to be considered as citizens, as equal to those that deem us less than. And in South Carolina, I want people to understand, because I hear this too often, and it goes to what Rep. Matthews said about people complaining about issues. And you'll hear folks oversimplify the political dichotomy of Republican and Democrat. South Carolina's entire executive branch, that's your governor on down, is Republican. South Carolina's General Assembly is Republican dominated with a supermajority.
Mm-hmm.
All of South Carolina's representatives that we have in Washington, D.C., that's in both the Senate and the House, except for one person, is Republican. And we have been that way for the last 25 to 30 years. Just to give you context, all right, the late Strom Thurmond, who also used to be the governor of South Carolina before he entered into Washington, held his seat for damn near 50 years. So South Carolina as a state has been conservative, Republican for longer than I have been on earth, and I'm almost 50. And so what I want Black people to understand, if they don't understand anything else from this panel, is that it's not that we're telling you to vote for nothing. It's not that we're telling you that magically our issues will be solved by a vote. But voting is one part of a process that we as a people have to take and have taken to get us one step closer to where we all say we want to be. So I don't want people to leave with this idea that we're saying that if you just vote, everything will be all right. We've got to play catch up. And I want to make sure that that's a message that resonates with everyone.
What he said, right? There's nothing more that I can add to that. Thank you so much, Mr. Davis. We are coming to the close of this conversation. And as we close out, I would like to have our panelists, provide some of their closing words of either encouragement, information, anything that you would like to share and kind of close out this conversation with. And with that, Representative Representative Matthews, I actually wanted to have you share with the community one of the most impactful legislations that you personally was able to impact the passing of and or sponsor.
So I thought about this question long and hard. And as I realized that it has been there far before me, I am most proud of the hate crimes bill and being a co-sponsor of that. And the reason I say that is because we're living in a political time right now where Black candidates feel like they have to distance themselves from the issues that directly affect our communities in order to be successful. And that is just not true. After fighting long and hard and everybody talking to one person here, one person there, we were able to pass it out of the House. Now, the Senate did not pass it, but the House, we did what we said we were going to do. And for me, I was proud of that because we are living under attack right now. Black communities, we're tired. It's hard to watch your people die every day in the news and in the media and on the radio. Every time you turn on something, it seems like we're losing one of us. And is it that we're the only ones dying? No, but that's what they're reporting. And so I just want to encourage all of y'all. That is for me, my most important, but I want y'all to be encouraged. I don't care how many laws they change. I don't care if they throw the Constitution away and burn it. I will never be a slave again. Do you hear me? I will never be a slave. Not that I was one before, but I'm saying slavery will never be in existence. And I think what we do is we get wrapped up in the fear of a thing. And we have got to overcome, y'all. We cannot keep living with that same thing in our mentality. We are not our ancestors. That's not in a negative way. That's not in a good way. I'm just saying we've progressed and we're at a different place in our lives right now. So when we talk about candidates like me, I'm running for the U.S. Senate against Tim Scott. Tim Scott is the most racially distant senator that the Black community could have ever not wanted to elect. Y'all, we got to have somebody who is not afraid to fight for our issues as well as other issues. You don't have to pick or choose. You can very well do both. And so what I want to say to the folks on this line is I appreciate y'all. I appreciate the work that y'all do. I do not do what I do alone. It takes more than just me. And everybody has their own little pockets that they're affecting life in. I want to say thank y'all. I know it's a thankless job. I know it gets hard. I want y'all to stay in the fight. Keep doing what you're doing. Because without people like us, our communities are going to fail and flounder. And Black people have got to stop just being responsive, but we've got to get on the offense. Here in South Carolina, Black folks have way more power than they ever realize. And I just want them to wake up and realize that the power is not in going along with who's already in power. The power is in coming together and utilizing your power and not getting sidetracked by little mediocrity things, little petty stuff that, we ain't spoke to our auntie in 20 years because she said something about your potato salad at the family reunion. We got to let stuff go. We will forgive them for something traumatic and then hold a grudge against our own for something that's, barely noticeable.
Absolutely.
I just want to speak truth today. I could come on here and talk about my platform, but y'all, I love our people. I want to see us do well. And I appreciate the folks on this call because they're taking the time to do things that they don't have to do. A lot of times our people sit around and they think somebody will take care of it. Y'all looking at the people that's taking care of it along the line with me. Give us some help.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I'm sorry. That was my
You are fine. And that's why we love you. I tell you, I wish we had more candidates like you. Next, Mr. Davis.
I've spoken a lot, but the only thing I can really say is to echo what Representative Matthews said. There are times when it feels as though to be Black is to be under a constant state of attack, to be a target. And when I look at my fellow Black people, my heart hurts because all we have ever wanted to do is just to live and be great. And it's sad that our existence has become a political talking point. And if we look at the history of this country, from the Dred Scott decision to the recent Supreme Court decision where they're now no longer allowing evidence that may exonerate a person who's been convicted of a crime to be accepted. It seems as though this country is hell-bent on designing a system to continuously oppress us. But it's through events such as this that I am encouraged. I am encouraged because in all of you who are participating, as well as the folks who are watching, I can feel the spirit of our ancestors and the fight that they had. And they did far more with far less. And that's what propels me to continue doing the best that I can, to being selfless instead of selfish, and understanding that we truly are all we got. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Next, Ms. April Richardson.
This has been an awesome conversation, and I'll try to keep my final remarks brief. Just I know it's been dropped in the chat, but well, first let me say that again, with this upcoming primary, please visit scvotes.gov to check your ballot so you know what's upcoming, so you can be prepared to vote and know what your selections are going in. And then also that we have to become a part of this process. So in the chat, it's been dropped that you can actually train to be a poll monitor. So if you plan to early vote and you've got time on this Tuesday, please click that link. You can sign up. Poll monitors are there to make sure that our elections are safe and fair. And so that means that when our community members are going to vote, they see someone that they know or that looks like them that can answer their questions and make sure that they're having that they have a positive experience, the experience that they should have. But also find out when our board of elections is hiring. We need to be a part of those processes as well. We need to be a part of the system that runs our elections and also a part of the system that runs our communities. There are too many places across our state where there's no, there's only one party that's represented on a ticket or someone is running completely unopposed. And so there are no options for our communities. Just like Representative said, you can be that option. That's not for everyone, but if you're interested in that, don't run from that. What we're looking for are people that understand our communities and our needs. And that's really all. That's a foundation. You can learn, on the job if necessary, but there are resources and tools to prepare you. But we need to represent ourselves. And finally, what I'll say is that I know everybody, we've discussed the fact that voting is one tool in our arsenal, and everybody, isn't necessarily, rooting for that to be the primary option. But what I would say to those people is not only to use this tool, but let's also be creating other ones. Are we building a community that can self-sustain? Are we growing and creating resources in our community that we can turn to when these systems that are built to hold us down are doing just that? As we work to dismantle this system, we also have to be building one that does work for us. So this is a great, there's never a bad time to start thinking about ways to, eliminate food apartheid in our own communities when we don't have grocery stores. Can we pool our resources together to come up with something to replace that? Are we supporting our farmers markets? We need to be doing these things in tandem. We need to be building. There are multiple ways to build power, but it requires us to come together as a community. And when we do that, not only can we see the change that we want to in these systems that we are working within, but we also begin to build systems that are truly intended to serve us because they were created by us.
Love it. And Mr. Stewart.
You okay? One, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. I am happy that things that I speak with my wife on a regular basis have been echoed um, in this conversation tonight. What I want to leave you with is the biggest boogeyman right now that's going around that people are kind of still jostling about is CRT, critical race theory. Critical race theory. Tonight, nothing that the panel has spoken about is a theory. It is actually happening. It is actually your history. It is actually your present. It is things that are going on right now. None of this is a theory. They are using these things to prevent you from voting, to prevent you from having a equitable, equal life under this constitution, within this government, within this country. Something about this has to make you angry or uncomfortable in some shape, form, or fashion, where you want to do something. Voting is probably that least little bit. But like Ms. Matthews said, Representative Matthews says, like Mr. David, they need help. I've only done community economic development since last May, and I'm telling you, it's still not enough. We need more. If you have 5 minutes, if you have 5 hours, if you have a day out of your time to give something, to talk about it, to look it up, to have someone explain it to you, please do so. Because right now, what is killing us is not a lot. It's not a lot of help out here. It's not a lot of people out here willing to say, "Hey, I'll be a servant leader." Come, there's not a lot of people out there willing to go and spend 12, 13, 14 hours in our best interest, not their best interest, in our best interest to try to get things for us, to help push us forward. But there are a lot of people out there spending a lot of time to keep them from doing what they need to do to help us be great. It's a lot of people doing that. It's a lot of money out there. And I'm not asking for money. What I will say is the the most dangerous thing you can give something is your time, because that means something to somebody at some place at some point. Your time is the most important thing you can give to something. Because guess what? If you have time to spend, you have time to learn something, you have time to teach something. And they are trying to prevent us from learning or teaching at the exact same time. It's not a theory. This is actually Happening. Plessy v. Ferguson was not a theory. Slaughterhouse was not a theory. None of those things were done were a theory. They were actually done under the guise of the Constitution of all the elected officials, and they knew it wasn't above board morally. Yet one nation under God, indivisible, still passed those laws. People have died, people have bled, people have prayed, people have walked, marched, they've done all sort of things for us to get to this point, just to get to this point. And we still got a long, long way to go. Please give something more than just, I'm not political. I don't understand all of this. I don't understand all of this. I don't. The little bit that I do understand, I try to act on. I try to do something to help change just a little bit. If we all did just a little bit, it would actually help a lot, but just a little. So all I'm asking for is just a little bit of your time, not to me, but for the cause of pushing us forward as a people.
Thank you, everyone, for your contribution on the conversation for this evening. As we close, I would like to announce our junior civic winner on this evening, and that would be Miss Crystal. Do you know how to pronounce Mr.
It's
Lewis?
Sean Lewis Jr.
Sean?
Rajon.
Rajon. Mr. Rajon Lewis Jr. Thank you so much for your participation and for just being a junior leader. This is what we need to be cultivating.
Can I
Right?
tell you something about him real quickly?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
He actually taught me how to interview when I won office in 2018.
What?
I was super nervous. I never talked alone. If you watch any of my videos from 2018, you always see J.A. Moore standing next to me. I was always super nervous to speak. Well, I went to do an interview with his dad about my political running. And while I was waiting, I was mad nervous. And so he sat down with me and he said, hey, listen, he said, think of it as just a conversation between two people. Now, this is this young child here. And I'm like, you know what? And I'm breathing through it. I mean, he's like got me in a whole calm down meditation thing going on. And he literally helped me get through that interview. Isn't that crazy?
That is amazing.
That is amazing.
I'm telling you, I was
And another add to that,
yes.
He is the son of Mr. Rajon Lewis Sr.
I was looking at that.
Who is also one of those individuals that answered the call, and he is involved in a primary next week running for House District 97. And so, yeah, he gets it honest is what I'm saying. So.
Awesome. That is amazing. And you know what? When we allow ourselves to continuously be learning, we can learn from anyone, right? At any age. So it was mentioned, quite a few times here that you just have to continue learning. More than a century after the right to vote was declared fundamental, that right is now under attack. Efforts to make it harder for racial minorities to participate in the political process is proliferating across the country by state, and we're still fighting those efforts with knowledge and action. That's what we are doing here. As I stated before, it's not just knowledge is power, but it's knowledge in action. That's truly our superpower. Now more than ever, we must put the biggest fight of our generation into action to protect the freedom and the power to vote. Again, this is not the only thing that we can do, but it's one of those tools in which we should utilize to the best of our capacity to enact this change. Voter mobilization is key to ensuring we get the access and the equity we deserve. Thank you once again for your time and attention. Thank you to the sponsors of this conversation, Black Voters Matter, and Juneteenth Freedom Fest Charleston. We look forward to having this conversation more. Have a great evening. We love you. Now go put knowledge into action.